Hi everybody. Vines grow well in temperate climates. We also have grapes in the tropics, Indonesia, India, Brazil. So there we have evergreen grapevines, and usually two harvests. One is a higher quality than the other. We also grow grapes in Colombia, Venezuela, many different countries nowadays. India has coming with new and expanding wineries. But mostly vines are grown in temperate climates from 20 to 10 degrees centigrade isotherms. Phenology is related to the different stages of vine development, so like when children change their teeth and so on. That's phenology. And the growth in the northern hemisphere is from April to October. The key stages of grapevine growth are dormancy, where there is no growth and just minimal activity. Then we have bud break around April 1st in California, and then bloom in a few weeks, and shortly after bloom, fruit set. That would be around 5 days after bloom. Then we have veraison, which is the onset of ripening, where berries change color, harvest, and ultimately leaf fall. We also would like to distinguish between vegetative cycle versus reproductive cycle. Vegetative cycle is referred to all the green tissue growth, and reproductive is just related to the berries. Here we have a picture of the bleeding. For this stage, it's important to have enough humidity in the soil, because there is translocation of potassium and chloride ions that creates pressure, and this push water up through the xylem and hydrates the buds. Then the buds start growing, like you can see here, and the first leaf come out. This cycle starts in California around April 1st, but depends on different climates. Here we have a classification of phenology and just the major stages. Here we have another one where you can see on the left just the major ones. Bud burst, shoots about 10 centimeters, flowering, full bloom, setting, berries pea size, veraison, and harvest. As I was saying before, we get out of dormancy with transition that is caused by osmotic root pressure. This requires moisture in the soil. The function in the xylem is restored, so sometimes we have, like you can see here, a cavitation in a vessel element, and this push of water is replenishing, rehydrating, preparing the whole system for the summertime. So it's very important at this time. Then we have bud break, and what happens at this time is that at the shoot tip we have meristematic tissue that is constantly reproducing, so there's a lot of nucleus in the cell, big nucleus in the cells that are mainly huge nucleus that are constantly reproducing. The temperature plays a role here, so temperatures above 10 degrees centigrade induce bud break, and that would change according to different species. We have also a phenomena called apical dominance that is caused by IAA and a hormone, and it's important for grapevines because they tend to grow high, so they search for light. And what happened also is that for that function, the grapevines develop tendrils, leaves, and clusters. You can see this is up here is a Winkler vine at UC Davis. It's about 1/8 of an acre. Here you see the tendency of the vines to just reach higher and reach for the light. And here you see the tendrils that they use to climb and attach to different bushes or whatever we have close by. The shoot growth is mainly determined by apical dominance, and this is again at the shoot tip. So if we remove the shoot tip, we promote growth of other shoots. In the nodes, which are this thickening here in the shoots, we have the buds, and usually we have 3 buds. The first 2 are fruitful, and the third is just vegetative. The root system is different in the sense that the roots grow directly from the center of the primary tissue, so not from nodes. The fine roots are responsible for absorption of water and minerals, mainly all active absorption. The thicker roots will provide anchorage, transport, and storage, and as well as water absorption too. You have here some examples of roots. They could be highly concentrated underneath drip emitters. Here you have some examples in limestone. So roots penetrate everywhere. Now we switch subject here, and here I'm talking about the leaves. This would be a perpendicular cut of a leaf. You see we have the upper epidermis, the cuticle, palisade, parenchyma cells. This is something very important here, which is chlorophyll, and these chloroplasts are actually grabbing sunlight energy and concentrating it and using it for photosynthesis, to split water molecules, and ultimately this will provide the energy to absorb carbon from the air and transform it into carbohydrates or sugars. You can see here a stoma or stomata in plural are the openings. In case of the grapevines, they are at the bottom of the leaves. They have 2 cells on the side. They are called guard cells that they open up because the translocation of potassium and chloride and water follows, and because of their shape, they just inflate and open the holes, allowing for water vapor to leave the leaf and CO2 to diffuse inside. So once we have this CO2 inside, then it's used up through with the energy of photosynthesis and transformed into sugars. And these sugars are translocated here through this phloem tissue, which is a transport tissue. I always say that grapevines are like straws, in the sense that the air is very dry, and the air is pulling water out from the leaves, and because of the properties of water, of cohesion and adhesion, the water molecules stick together, so water column, it's pulled all the time, all the way from the soil. So this is another drawing of the same thing. And here you can appreciate the water potential. You can see it's tension, so it's negative. The dry air might be minus 100 megapascals, and if you can see, the soil might be minus 0.01 megapascals. So it's a huge difference and a big gradient, and that is pulling water upwards. For the transport of sugars, we have different hypotheses. The common and accepted one is the pressure flow hypothesis. So once sugars are produced in the leaves, they are translocated to the phloem, transport tissue, and they act as osmoticon, increasing temperature and creating pressure. And with this pressure, the sugars are moved throughout the vine. And that's how growth is produced. And at different times throughout the season, we have different tissues growing more or less. So for the roots, we have 2 root flash. One is at bloom and the other one is at harvest. You can see them here, bloom, harvest. Then the shoots, they have exponential growth in the first month of the season, and then resumes later on. Then stops later on. And then the fruit, the berries, how we have a double sigmoidal growth curve with 3 stages, and these are pretty important. So if we start from the reproduction, here is a flower, and you can see that we have the male parts and the female parts together. We call that hermaphrodite. And there is a cap that dries out and falls and exposes the anthers that have the pollen to the style and the stigma and the ovary. So there is self-pollination. We don't need pollinators or wind or anything for this pollination to happen. Something important, the whole objective of this chart is to show you that the vegetative part and reproductive part initiates 1 year in advance. So whatever climate we have this season will influence the following year's crop. Here you can read some more about pollination and fertilization and fruit set, which is a critical stage. We recommend not to do absolutely anything at the vineyard between bloom and fruit set. The berry growth, we divide this in 3 stages. The first stage would be about 5 to 6 weeks, where we have mainly growth. Here we have on the y-axis berry size growth, and on the x-axis time. So most of the growth here is by cell division. Then we have a lag phase with no growth. It's about 4 weeks. And then at this time we have veraison, which is the onset of ripening, followed by 6 more weeks, at least to 8 eventually, of growth, mainly caused by cell elongation. Would be interesting to consider in this chart also that there are some compounds that are changing in concentration. So acids, mainly malic, tartaric, and citric, are produced during the first stage, and especially malic increase very importantly before veraison, and 2 weeks before veraison starts to decrease because it's used up for sugars. Tartaric acid is increasing concentration all the time throughout the season. Sugars are increasing up from this point high up, increasing ripeness. And something I would add very interesting is that the aroma development. So most grassy and bell pepper aromas are produced during the first stage, and most floral and fruity aromas are produced during the third stage. Here you can appreciate that after veraison, sugar concentration is increasing in the berries and acidity is decreasing. Something to mention is that we probably have, in warmer areas, this happens faster, so we can harvest usually at higher Brix and lower acidity. And in cooler areas, we might have higher acidity and lower sugars. Here you have some analysis of the composition of grapes. Some compounds are pretty important in the berries, so we do care about the skins, because in the skins tannins are produced, and they're important in case of the anthocyanins for color and other tannins for astringency. And almost all aroma compounds are produced in the skins too. So here you have a picture of berries at veraison changing color. Harvest can be done by hand or mechanically. If you can see here, there is probably no water is missing, and the vine is very vigorous. But the problem is that there is not much light exposure, and light would be very important for wine color, tannins, and aroma compounds. But so we're increasing the yields, but maybe some characteristics might not be there. We try to reach a balance between vegetative growth and reproductive growth, because it's not possible to get high quality fruit in high quantities. Although there is also the opposite is not true, that extremely low quantities will have the highest quality. We have some rules for that. Vine capacity is limited and it's proportional to total growth. So the pruning will regulate the capacity and the vigor. And there is a compensation principle because the vines self-adjust. Water is very important. I might talk about that later on. And we measure the water availability. We can measure that in the soil, in the vines, just following the climate changes. And this is a regulated deficit irrigation, just to change berry size. In particular research papers, irrigation was reduced during the first stage of berry development, and berries, as you can see here, are smaller in size. We have berry size on the y-axis and time on the x. Soil is also very important. More than anything, probably for berries, is that the water available capacity. You can see here we have from sandy to clay soil and how much water is available to plants. You may see that clay is not the highest amount necessarily. Loam seems to be the higher. And the easiest way to stress vines is in sandy or sandy loam soils. pH is also important. You see the most nutrients are more available at a pH around 7. Another important factor is the genetic, because the genes detect most of the aroma compounds and characteristics in the grape that are later modified by the environment, but the genes have to be there, so the clonal selection is important. We do use a different species for our scions and for the rootstocks. The rootstocks are usually resistant to phylloxera, so we graft on top of the resistant rootstocks any cultivar that we like and clone that we like. We also have different pruning systems and training system. Here is a head-trained vine, and this is a cordon-trained vine. This is a spur prune, which is easier and faster to do, and this also has some spurs. It could be cane prune as well. Canopy management is related to the light interaction. You can see in this canopy that there is a great light exposure, and it's also easier for any spray application, and of course better to fight powder mildew and different diseases. Trellis will help you for that. This is the VSP, the vertical shoot positioning trellis, most common here in California, but there are many others. This other is the Lyra. It's pretty common in some parts of France with higher production. And this is the overhead training that is used in Italy and Argentina and different places called Parral or Parrale. So, last but not least, vines need food, and these are just some of the major nutrients and deficiency symptoms for that. Thanks for now.